Let's see. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Let's see. Oh, hello, Doctor. How's your day going, John Shea? Well, it's been busy and stressful and annoying. Does anyone here spy Vort's F6Us? I'm not sure, Peter Dawson. Let's see. Let's go through. Jeff Beeler, afternoon. I proposed a topic based on an article about how U.S. Langley's captain developed American carrier methods in the 1920s. I wanted to know how actually being on carrier operations affected the RN. We'll get into that, but this is far more about the piracy and the things like that sort of going on. I have to admit also it's not going to go much into the 1930s because I've had about 3 days this week pretty much intermittent internet access because of various things. 2 days where it was shut down completely because of the electricians. And that's caused things like long patrols haven't gone up, and, well, we had no electricity or internet, so, hey ho. Long patrols haven't gone up, and all sorts of things haven't happened. So, yeah, it's been a fun week. Right then. Hello, Kahidran. Hello, Carl Gazbo. Hello, that guy named Dan. Hello, Albert Zasky. Hello, old Richard. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Matthias Savik. Hello, DG40 and Nautical Wolf. Hello, Stafford Thompson. Hello, Dunrick Ironhammer. Hello, John Shea. And hello, Greg Stahowski. Felix B. Hello, Dan Freeman. Good to see you all here. Hope you're well. Hello, Man1640. Where is he? Yeah. Hello, Bart Foster. As I said, having fun trying to get through everything. Hello, Jess P. Hello. Right. Hello. Let's see. What else I missed? No, don't think I missed one. Hello, Donald Camera. It's live. Hello, Avian Enterprise. And hello, Andrew Bend. Hello, DM Carpenter. And hello, Shawmac and Like a Man. And King's Rook. And new IKB472. Hello. And Carl Harmon. Hello. And Captain Seaboard. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Right then. And Shoot Me. Hello. Sorry, I missed you there. And Shane F. You managed to get hidden in amongst everyone. Yes, I know. My 640. I know. Finally, I'm here. It's live and it's working. I do apologize. I don't know. It's been a fun day, let's say, and it wasn't fun just before the beginning. But no, this will be fun. Right then. Today's topic. It's counter-piracy, RN China Station. And I've divided into 3 because this is going to be a long patrol. This is probably going to be the first long patrol of February because, honestly, I'm not going to get through everything today. For starters, I know I'm not going to get through everything because I haven't managed to complete the slides because of the issues I've been having on the 1930s. So it's going to concentrate on the 1920s where a lot happens anyway. And I can talk through things, and there's more than enough. Gadrin, you need to bring in an FRA when you start the stream late. Well, yeah, that would probably be a good thing. For my stress levels alone. I don't know what it is. Yeah. I try and be a nice guy. And, sometimes I feel I get walked all over. But that's for an entirely different conversation. Probably one involving therapy at some point. I don't know. There again, I'm British. Probably won't be therapy. I'll just drink my feelings with iron brew. I'm only 640. When you're chatting while I do, sign up for research study for 2/3 chance to get COVID vaccine early routine. Good luck. So, the major book that's been used for today to support a large amount of today's work is this. Of course, the Royal Navy China Station. It's been used as the key text to thread all the others around. There have been various journal articles used. There have been various other things used. But mainly, it is this being used as the core text. To try, because it's the closest I've got to a day-by-day guide without getting into the National Archives of what was going on at the station. So it's what I've been using. And there are lots of there are lots of piracy events, and there are lots of variations. There are destroyers shelling things. There are submarines giving them panic attacks. There is carriers being involved. And we talk about HMS Hermes, but actually the Royal Navy does a whole dual carrier thing because they have both Argus and Hermes out there at one point, and they both go wild. Yes, we never really think of Argus taking part in combat operations, but welcome to counter-piracy. She had fun. Jebula, I have that book. I need to read it. We all need to read it. It's a good one. Thunder Kama, sounds like you need to go and pet FRA Tefra for a bit, and please keep your sanity. I'll keep my sanity, don't worry. It's just been a fun day. I'll get there. So, definitely a flask of Iron Brew time. What I find annoying is the computer system notwithstanding, I don't like being late. I like to be on time for things. And I don't know. Right, so, shoot me. Is this kind of fun what happens on the China station stays on the China station? Sort of. John Shane asks, Ian Carr. Handing over to the RN Piracy Office in Weihai Wei. Well, the Piracy Office at Weihai Wei, Hong Kong, the one in Singapore. There are a few others as well. Tav Johnson, Paddle Wheels of Doom. Not so often, but occasionally. Shomak, that can't be possible popular perception. Says the Japanese were the first ones to come up with using carriers together because everyone in the RN and USM are Luddites. Yeah, I know, but that's wrong. Dantrin, remind me, this isn't the RN town class, totally not a surface raider force, is it? Not in the 1920s. In the 1930s, yes, there is a town class. HMS Birmingham gets up to so much little fun. We won't get on to what the town class in the Indian Ocean got up to on their counter-piracy ops. That was, frankly, just evil. That was just not nice. No, at one point, there seemed that there is a report that a dhow got caught between two town-class cruisers, and instead of sending a boarding party, they just squashed it. It saved lives, and they picked everyone up in the water afterwards. But no one was killed, so it was okay, and probably didn't have to squash it that much. It was a dhow. So these would be C and D, correct? Quite a lot of county class, quite a lot of Hawkins class, including HMS Hawkins herself. And the Australians and New Zealanders do get involved in the counter-piracy ops, though they have less because they usually operate in down to the south. So it's the major concentrations of Singapore of piracy are Singapore and around Hong Kong. Those are the major areas where they're doing counter-piracy operations. Other areas, it's going to sound strange, you need a concentration of trade to make the piracy viable, because and you need to be a space where the ships aren't really aren't really maneuvering at high speed or maneuvering properly. It's life. Anyway. So, what was this all based in? Well, there were many subsequent treaties which re-agreed this, but basically the Treaty of Tientsin. Articles 52 and 53 are the critical ones. Article 52, British ships of war coming for no hostile purpose or being engaged in the pursuit of pirates shall be at liberty to visit all ports within the dominions of the Emperor of China, and shall receive every facility for the purpose of provisions, procuring water, and if occasion require for making of repairs. The commanders of such ship shall hold intercourse with the Chinese authorities on terms of equality and courtesy. That's actually a very big thing, but we won't get in. You can't really discuss 52 without discussing 53 for counter-piracy operations. In consideration of the injury sustained by native and foreign commerce from the prevalence of piracy in the seas of China, the high contracting parties agreed to concert measures of its suppression. I.e., the whole lot get together. The idea is that the British and the Chinese authorities are supposed to be working together. It often depends on who's actually running the show, how successful the British are, or any of the powers are at working with the Chinese authorities. If it's a local warlordic system, then frankly they're not usually that successful, because the pirates, kind of like the ones in Somalia and various other places, tend to be, well, the pirates themselves tend to be at the poorer end of the groups involved in pushing piracy, whereas the local warlord tends to be at the upper end, but not really exposing themselves to as much danger or risk. So, yeah, they can be quite problematic to get to, which is where aircraft come in and intimidating, because the aircraft can appear from wherever they like. Kingsbrook, I would ask if the Royal Canadian Navy was involved, but this is the 1920s, so there wasn't an RCN to speak of. There was a fishery protection service, definitely. There is a bit of an RCN, but nothing this range. In car, so the Brits are moving on from selling opium to Chinese counter piracy. Ironic. Oh no, at this point, when they're doing this treaty, they're still doing the whole opium selling thing. But the trouble is, their opium ships keep getting pirated, so they need permission to go in without starting another war with China. And it's just easier to have the Chinese officials help you out whenever your ship comes into port, rather than keep having to beat them up to get them to help you. It's just easier, you know. Hey, especially, you see, the thing is, traditionally, prior to this point, prior to China being in many ways beaten down a bit by the various assembled European powers, which I'm sure has no bearing at all on the current China we're dealing with. I'm sure there is no psychological scarring from the various vicious beatdowns delivered by various European powers over the 19th and early 20th centuries. So it's always lovely when people go, yes, but this doesn't matter with the modern world. They go, nicest way. If you consider how much in Britain and America and various things we consider historical events, which were nowhere near that long ago, and you also consider how China likes to talk about events which were a lot longer ago than comparatively recent events, like less than a couple of hundred years ago, or about 100 and nearly less, a lot less, about 170 odd, 160 odd years ago. They really do remember. It's one of the interesting things when you're dealing with China. There are some things going on. There were no Blackburns. There were mostly flycatchers and fairy frees. Flycatchers would often take the lead in bombing, but fairy frees would do a fair bit as well. So I hope that answers your question, Jeff Beeler. And Jeremy Inca probably put this in the same table to Treasury, trade protection. Oh yes, they did. It was trade protection. The counter piracy was trade protection, definitely. But also, counter-piracy is a very good way of the global hegemon, primus inter pares, whatever, showing its strength and capabilities. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's put it this way. If you're the world number one, you can't show off your capabilities by keep picking fights with everyone. You're going to end up wearing out your equipment, your ships, your people, everyone. In fact, picking fights with people is something you want to avoid as well, number one, because wars are messy and there's always a chance you can lose. So you only really want to pick them when you can win. There's the old line from Blackadder where it's basically the British Army like to fight wars against opponents who were mostly armed with sticks. Even particularly sharpened pieces of guava fruit were considered slightly dangerous. The Royal Navy isn't quite like that, and definitely Britain in reality isn't quite like that. There's a reason that's a bit of a joke, but that's sort of true. You don't want to pick a fight with Europe. You don't want to pick a fight with the Chinese government. You don't want to pick a fight with anyone major unless you have to. So, how do you show off how powerful your warships are? Well, you beat up non-state actors. That's it, because guess what? Pirates never have the infrastructure behind them, because they have to get what they want can from where they can. They never have resource lines. Almost no one will claim to support them, and so you can beat them up, and everyone's going, yay, good for you. Even if they were supporting them, they're going to go, yay, good for you, because they've just seen you deliver an epic beatdown on this person, blow them sky high with whatever came their way, and they don't want to get involved in that. They don't want to get involved in that because it's painful. So, this is the point. So for Britain, concluding treaties with people which allows them to hunt down pirates is a very good thing. It allows them a reason. That suddenly becomes a legitimate reason. Why is the Royal Navy maintaining such a large presence in the Far East? Oh, well, we need to deliver on our counter-piracy mission, Japan. That's what we are signed up to do by a treaty, an ancient treaty with China. You can't really argue with that. That's in a treaty. Britain's living up to its treaty obligations. Commitment and protection of the empire, dominions, and living up to treaty obligations means we have to maintain this force within the region. What are you going to do? So, counter-piracy as part of a treaty, piracy is great. And Urban Wickstrom? My little cousins watch these videos, so language. I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with it. But younger cousins watching. Shomak, I'm sure the British wanted full access to Chinese ports for just counter-piracy, and they were doing nothing else while they were there, like surveying the ports. Oh, of course not. Well, surveying the ports, generally getting food organised, it's fine times. Seth Thompson, don't worry. And I would suggest rest your shoulders and fingertips. Kingsler, was it Noble or Rainbow that was, to quote Drac, the world's most heavily armed fishery protection ship? Niobe or Rainbow? I think it was Niobe, which was the world's most heavily armed fisheries protection ship, and then Rainbow came after that. So can never be the world's most heavily armed fisheries protection ship because her elder sister came first. Not a Gorf. Were there ever any joint operations other than Commonwealth nations? Oh yes, the Chinese were regularly taken along for them to be called joint operations. There were a few times the Americans tagged along and we did it jointly with the Americans. There were a couple of times we even did it jointly with the Japanese. But usually, we're fine. Shomak, for the massive file of everything about every bit of a sheltered sea on the planet. Car, Brits haven't fought the French since 1815, but still largely love to hate them. Yes, we do. We do. And you should see we've been part of the same, there's been part of the same country, England and Scotland, for centuries now, and we still love to wind up each other. Calvin Gasser, really long Chinese memory. In Hungary, we ring the church bells since 1456. Thus, who do not study history are sentenced to relive it. Yeah. Anyway, was the September 1927 strike on Bayastare Bay by Hermes and Argus the largest operation between the wars? Also, it was the first real RN carrier operation. Well, the thing was, it wasn't just, and we'll be getting this, just a carrier operation. It was also an amphibious operation. And cruisers involved. I mean, it's basically the Royal Navy and the China Station showing up with a full combined arms. Have fun! We're gonna... Look, you always love it. They tell you it's a police-led raid. Yes, there are 18 policemen, 26 Royal Navy officers, 450 men, landing craft of a type, and cruisers, destroyers, and 2 aircraft carriers. That is a police-led operation. Yes. We believe in the police. Weren't several buccaneers in the Caribbean East Coast supported by Britain versus Spain? Yes. And on the flip side, wouldn't the East India Company be considered pirates by the Chinese? And the Japanese at various points, but that was the East India Company. Totally different. Yeah, that's the East India Company. That's completely different. That's like United Fruit are completely different from the American government. If we get into this. Jeff Wheeler, Royal Marines too. I'm presuming the Royal Marines are part of the 450 men. I'm presuming there was a heavy section of Royal Marines as well as naval personnel in it. Sonny Manicos, opium from British Empire to China had been ended by 1917. By 1917, but remember, the Treaty of Sisson is 1856. So that was 54... 61 years of supply covered by the treaty. Yeah. Just remember that the first war, the first drug war, wasn't a war to stop drugs. It was a war to push it. And Britain won. What can I say? It's a fun times. Oh, before we jump on to that thing. To the next slide. What do I have to show? I have something to show you. Well, I remember. I think I've lost it again. Oh, no, I haven't lost it. That wants to go on the car keys. I currently have a key. My office. Theoretically finished, but probably going to do a lot of work in it first. But, yeah. So, with that done, there are probably going to be a few more videos about it at some point. But that, of course, has been why computers have been kept being down. Thank you. Mealane 6040. Opium is a great reason to have a war. Would you rather fight to the death or smoke some opium? Well, that's the thing. Apparently the Chinese would rather fight to the death. I can understand it. Jim Larson, hello. Any evidence of use of modern motor launches used by East Asian pirates? What's the most formidable ship band of pirates in the area at the time? Okay, it's usually the Bias Bay pirates tend to be the strongest of the ones, and that's most of the big operations focus on them for that reason. They're quite near Hong Kong. They don't tend to use motor launches because motor launches stick out. So what they tend to use are various forms of local... No, I wouldn't say junks, but we'll get into that. We will be getting into the Bias Bay discussions later on. Sorry for not a nice joke. Love your lectures. As I said, it was a very funny joke. I was laughing at it, but I just I don't want to be killed by my cousins. So if their little kids are watching, I don't know. It's safer. Yes, it is a Lancaster because I decided I wouldn't lose that. It was the biggest one I could find. All the ship ones were very nice, but they were very dinky. The Lancaster was massive. Sheriff, some politicals want to replace the Union flag as it is threatening. Perhaps we can have a skull and crossbones over Union flag? I wouldn't say replacing that would be sensible. Cinemanico, when China also had a domestic opium production, it's less about pushing drugs and more about free trade, or a pitch war between dealers if you prefer. I would go for the latter, and I would say also the opium the East Indian Company was supplying was a lot stronger than the domestically produced one. Far better poppies. So, piracy on the China coast, and this comes from a journal article, which I've had for so many years, I no longer know which journal it's from. I only know I found it on JSTOR, and then when I went searching for it, I couldn't find it on JSTOR again. But I think it is still on JSTOR somewhere. I'm just probably looking in the wrong place on JSTOR. So what about so this is a revival of the war junk era. Not so much the war junk as the merchant junk modified. And here is one of the things that you have to find. You have to wonder about piracy when we talk about the 1920s and 30s. And I'll read this out, and then I'll get into discussion of it. As old-fashioned piracy died out with the coming of steamships, a new kind designed to cope with the new conditions appeared. While some of the new pirates may have been recruited from the old, the new piracy required a knowledge of modern shipping practices unlikely to be common amongst the old fishermen come pirates. As before, however, the new style piracy was most prevalent around Hong Kong, embarrassingly close to the headquarters of the anti-piracy forces. It was adding insult to injury when the steam launch Wo Fat Xing was pirated in Hong Kong harbour in 1927 and $30,000 in gold bars stolen. Newspapers made great play of such facts. Highly coloured accounts of pirate companies being established in Hong Kong along sound business lines, replete with boards of directors and so on, were common in the British and American press in the 1920s and early 30s. The rumour that some of these companies had attractive Chinese women in command added some spice to these stories. Yeah. So, hello, constant journalists. Here's the reality. There were probably a few female leaders of the various Chinese gangs. But honestly, suggesting boards of directors and piracy companies, not really the case. Honestly, most of them are extensions of existing triad organizations or local feudal lords' personal armies, in that they had some people trained. There were a few freeboot sort of people and smaller gangs involved which specialize in it, but honestly, and Melanie 6040, as I know, as opposed to unattractive Chinese women, yeah, apparently it's only the pretty and smart Chinese ladies who decide to run piracy companies according to these newspapers. And I did go and look up some up, and they're all basically, they follow a certain stereotypic form. And I wouldn't be surprised if half of them were written by people who'd never actually been to China. But we'll leave that to one side. We're not going to comment on the quality of press in the 1920s and 30s and whether or not it's just as interesting as today and whether or not we keep imagining that there was this golden age of newspapers and really there's never been a golden age of news. There's always been a healthy dose of good journalists and a healthy dose of journalists who, frankly, you're not sure where they get the words from. King's Rook, add about 4 zeros to the figure for the modern value of that cold. Yeah, about 4. Peter Dawson, didn't an RN boat HMS Conqueror fly a skull and crossbones when it returned from Falklands less than 40 years ago? Royal Navy ships, submarines, whenever they've sunk, and other ships fly a skull and crossbones. If they get a hit for every single one of their torpedoes they launch, they attach a broom to the periscope when they're coming into harbour. Kingsrook, so calling them tabloids would be insulting to tabloids. Possibly. Greg Salsky, is that like the movie version of Scientist Librarian who always has glasses and a hair in a bun? Yeah, pretty much. Shamak, having a board of directors for a piracy company seems distinctly British. Projections, maybe. I'm not going to comment on it, but yeah, there's lots of weird things. A clean sweep. Yes, it is. That's what the broom stands for, anyway. No, it's a lot of fun, and it's some really cool history what goes on. As I said, it's going to become next week's Long Patrol as well. And that's not just down to the fact that I think I'm still going to be building and sorting out things over the weekend, so actually writing another Long Patrol would probably take a little bit too much time. Once I'm finally in the office, I'm hoping to get ahead on these things, but at the moment, no. So, Nordic Wolf wasn't one of the most successful pirates in history of Chinese women. Yes, she was. I've forgotten her name right now off the top of my head. But, as I said, there were a fair number who were very, very good. And there were a few, let's be honest, there have been, it was Qing Shi. Eventually commanded a fleet numbering hundreds of ships in the early 19th century, 1800s. No, Qing Shi is fun. King's Rook. They could fire torpedoes when they left Royal Navy service. That's all I'm saying. The upholders could fire torpedoes. We weren't sure of many things, but they could fire torpedoes. But no, it's... One of the other things that you often get is, and this comes through in the naval accounts versus the diplomatic accounts. The foreign office accounts of piracy in the region always seem, and the journalistic accounts always seem to imagine it's far more structured than it is and far more organized than it is. Because for them, they can't understand, without a lot of organization structure, how ships can be found in the ocean by pirates in the modern age. Whereas the Royal Navy is less worried about their sort of structure and organization, doesn't think them such, because the Royal Navy operates on the policy that, well, ships of a certain size tend to need a certain spaces to run, and they do tend to start organizing shipping lanes. And when you realize what the regular routes are, ships don't pass that far apart in terms of bounds along those routes. especially the ships which are engaged in the coastal trade or in direct from Shanghai to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Singapore, or Shanghai to Tokyo, etc. You can predict their routes quite well. And this means that the Royal Navy doesn't consider it that unusual. Plus, there are examples of pirates getting aboard ships in the Canton and them having their weapons shipped on board the ship as things in crates marked as goods and supposed to be okay. And then they burst out their weapons from the hold and take over the ship. And then the Royal Navy has to deal with it. Carmen, with plenty of traffic comes a good chance to find ships. Bingo. So Thompson, I would have thought that Mao wouldn't let them get away with it. Well, you see, that's the thing. It's not Mao this time. It's the one who's coming up, and at this point at which when China is really broken up. It's 1928, roughly, when Chiang Kai-shek achieves some form of unified China, theoretically unified China, I would like to point out. And yeah, there's really not a strong centralized government in China at any point in this period. Brent Paulus, were there hostage situations then? There were quite a few. And the Royal Navy dealt with some of them in an interesting way. In fact, the one which involves a submarine, which we're discussing, which happened in 1927. The really big incidents in the 1920s happened in 1927, so those are the ones I'm going to focus on this time. There were hostages taken, and they were rescued by submarine. It's a fun times. Don't worry, Stafford. So, who do we have in charge in the beginning of this period? And I'm going to expand the screen so I can chat about them a bit more. Well, we have Vice Admiral Sir Alexander Ludovic Duff, and then Admiral Sir Arthur Kavanagh Leveson. Duff is one of those go-everywhere, do-everything officers. Very good at his job, very efficient. And, you know, he was incredibly capable, but it was also one of the things that the Royal Navy has as their advantages. They did have these intelligent officers they could deploy. They couldn't maybe deploy a lot, but they could deploy very, very smart officers. Duff is deployed with Henderson aboard Hawkins, which is the newest cruiser the Royal Navy has. Captain Reginald Henderson, one of the smartest captains in the Royal Navy at that time, fresh out of his time of service in the Admiralty, where he'd come up with convoys and all sorts of things for Jellicoe, and he comes along. And they hold the Higher Command of the Pacific and its headquarters conference in March 1921. This is the conference that concludes that Singapore is the only site suitable for the location of the Higher Command of any Pacific war, as well as for the main fleet base. The loss of Singapore would be a disastrous to the British Empire. As you can see, I haven't had time to correct throw to 4 today. I apologise. Interesting enough, both officers were considered above average for their age. Leveson is arbitrary, noting he was endowed with brains of an exceptional character, with great power in the acquisition of all sorts of knowledge and information. Those who partook of his ever-ready hospitality would be sure to find the map and book relating to the latest topic of interest laid on his table, and would listen to his incisive judgments with pleasure and interest. It was indeed remarkable that one whose life had been largely spent in the study of more material side of exacting profession should have found time to stimulate a knowledge of history and geography combined that was far above the average. His general presence will be greatly missed. Those words were, of course, written by Admiral Sir William Goodenough, who, as well as being commander of the 2nd Light Cruiser Squadron in World War One, was president of the Royal Geographical Society in the interwar period when he wrote that. So, in other words, the Royal Navy are sending out their smart cookies to the Far East. Cosmonauts, who else is thinking of Duff beer or Duff beef? Hello, Turning 3434. I hope you're well. Gaham, this is why I think the RN should have a Type 31 in the Gulf at all times, and a flotilla of fast attack boats based on a Tomar are similar, with 30 to 40mm main gun, and 20 at the back, along with machine guns. Always fun. Nordic Wolf, doesn't sound like piracy tactics have changed all that much, at least in the court. They never do. Basically, piracy tactics just read high seas robbery. But think of it more like a bank robbery than anything else. So you've got your vault, which your protection for your ship is at sea. There's a sea around it, in fact, it's moving. So it's vault, it's got its customers and all these things. You're going in there. It's an armed robbery on a bank. That's the scenario you're going into when you're taking a ship in piracy. It's fun. And these are good admirals. And I would like to point out that this book takes all these pages to get through the 1920s and 30s. So it covers 1864 to 1941. And I would say a good quarter of the book is on these 20 years. Which possibly explains why I haven't finished assimilating it all and putting it all together. Now, some key events of 1919 to 1924. There isn't much piracy going on, but there is the Higher Command Conference. There is the Sempil mission in 1921. There is the 9-Power Agreement, which is supposed to respect China's sovereignty. Please note the countries listed in that. Britain, USA, Japan, France, Italy, Belgium, Holland, Portugal. All have to respect China's sovereignty. Yes. In 1922, Portugal was considered a threat to China's sovereignty. See, I, for one, have many Portuguese friends, and I would never doubt they could be a threat to anyone's sovereignty if they wanted to be. They are very organized. And they produce a whole alcohol called port, which admittedly I don't imbibe, but you know. In March 1922, HMS Renown arrives in Singapore, taking the Prince of Wales on his Far East tour. So when the Royal Navy sends a battlecruiser around the world without a Royal on, it's of course a special thing, which they're doing. When they put in a Royal tour, it's a Royal tour. We're not sending a battlecruiser around the world to show you how scary we can be. And we're not sending the battlecruiser specifically to Japan to show how scary we can be, but also how good we can be as your friends. No, no, no. We're sending it because we're sending the Prince of Wales around. Massive earthquake in September 1923 in the Tokyo-Yokohama region. The emperor of the time is okay because he isn't there. He's basically been moved out of the way because he's not really all there mentally. 1924, June, there's a new causeway between Singapore and Malay Peninsula officially opened. And in November, Admiral Leveson writes, war outside Shanghai ended when Ho Feng Lin and his associate fled to Japan on the 13th September on the Shanghai Maru. Chai Hisin Yuan was the victor. Foreign settlement was untouched. Foreign settlement was untouched because there was quite a large number of ships there. And, of course, there is the Washington Naval Treaty. Now, why am I putting the Washington Naval Treaty in when I'm talking about this? There is a reason, but first I'll answer the questions. Old Richard, when could Singapore be said to constitute a proper naval base, not just a fueling anchorage? 1930, 1935? I would... Naval base takes a while, but you're probably looking at about 1929 for it to be a fairly decent naval base, but it's 1935 before it's the naval base that it is seized in World War II. Oh, Richard, when could... well, I've answered that question. Let's see. Carl Harmon.Clark. 40mm is the smallest caliber which will have guided shells in the foreseeable future, just in case container of Chinese copy spiked and lost missiles appear. Yep. Ian Carr, how are relations with the Royal Japanese Navy at this time when the UK declining to renew the naval treaty with Native American? They're okay. The Royal Navy is doing quite a lot of good, positive stuff with Japan. If you consider when the earthquake hits in Tokyo-Yokohama, Hawkins flying the flag of Admiral Leveson with L. Leveson on, I think, as far as I understand it. First goes to Shanghai to pick up doctors and materials from the international hospital there, and then heads over to assist. There is a lot of Royal Navy, Japanese Navy cooperation going on, and a lot of working together, so it's okay at this point. But remember, things in Japan sort of... I hate to say this, but things in Japan are sort of doing that. It picks up pace. So in the 1920s, it's still in this sort of this phase. Jack, remember Macau was Portuguese. They had to have a place in such a treaty. Oh yes, Macau was, and there was also but there is also the legitimate thing that the Portuguese are no walkovers. Jermac, were significant private security groups present on interwar South China Sea, like on modern ships around Horn of Africa? Not really, no. Your own crew were expected to defend their ship. They would carry guns, and the sailors would be expected to learn how to use them, but the trouble was they often weren't really that practiced and didn't use them that much. Captain Seaport, read Portugal. There's a reason England's been allied in the last 650 years. Yes, they are very capable. They are our oldest ally. Steph Johnson. Basically, the emperor was Hirohito became the de facto emperor long before his father died. In September 1923 earthquake, which damages the RJ and battlecruiser Maggie. Yep. Carmen, you are tasked with designing an anti-piracy fast attack craft. That's hull is based on Tamar Act. What's in armament? Oh, judging by this experience, plenty of 40mm. So, the Washington Naval Treaty has some specific joys in it for the Far East. The United States, the British Empire, and Japan agreed that the status quo at the time of signing of the present treaty, with regard to fortifications and naval base, shall be maintained in their respective territories and possessions specified hereunder. The insular possessions, which the United States now holds, or any hereafter acquire in the Pacific Ocean, except A, those adjacent to the coast of the United States, Alaska and Panama Canal Zone, not including the Aleutian Islands and the Hawaiian Islands, Hong Kong and the insular possessions which the British Empire now holds, or many hereafter acquire in the Pacific Ocean, east of the meridian of 110 degrees, east for longitude, except A, those adjacent to the coast of Canada, B, the Commonwealth of Australia and its territories, and C, New Zealand. 3. The following insular territories are possessions of Japan in the Pacific Ocean, to wit, the Kurio Islands, the Bonin Islands, Manishosha, the Lachu Islands, Formosa, and Praseas, and any insular territories or possessions of the Pacific Ocean which Japan may hereafter acquire. The maintenance of status quo under the foregoing provisions implies that no new fortifications or naval bases shall be established in the territories and possessions specified, that no measures shall be taken to increase the existing naval facilities for the repair and maintenance of naval forces, and that no increase shall be made in the coast defences of the territories and possessions above specified. The restriction, however, does not preclude such repair and replacement of worn-out weapons and equipment as is customary in naval and military establishments in times of peace. Now, this has a big impact because what had Japan been arguing for? Well, they've been arguing for the ability to build bases because they said they needed them to counter piracy. With Britain and America saying they're going to be involved in the piracy, we've all got our own bases, therefore you don't need to take on sole role, and by the way, we've got citizen treaty and these sort of things, we can agree this treaty. And we'll do it this way so that it gives you a reason to feel you don't have to worry about us building bases close to you as well. So Japan kind of talked themselves into a corner with that one. And the whole thing allowed the Royal Navy to be and America to feel quite confident in 1922 in their position in the Far East. Yes, Japan was building up, but they were quite powerful, and Japan wasn't allowed to build these forward bases. Or rather, if they did build them, they could get in trouble. It would be a casus belli for breaking the treaty. And how do you maintain an idea of whether your enemy is building bases? Well, you know what? You go and visit them on a regular basis. Yes, this is the other reason you do the presents. The Royal Navy would go and visit them. King's Room. I think the design for the Port class super came off as well equipped for counter-piracy. 3 times twin 40mm turrets. Yep. In car, no Furious, Glorious, Courageous class carriers seem to turn up in the Far East. Reasons? They have need for them in Europe and in the Mediterranean. Plus, they don't come in until really the 1930s in sort of their major roles. And it's expensive to deploy them. It's another reason why the battle cruisers only really visit. They don't stay. The bigger that you've got a small aircraft carrier there permanently doing the stuff, you don't need a big aircraft carrier there. So the big aircraft carrier can stay with the fleets, which you would deploy with. Peter Dawson, I thought New Zealand was constitutionally part of the Commonwealth of Australia. No, they're technically separate. Technically. Everyone glorifies this period of mobsters. Everyone does. It's a constant thing. People like to hear about mobsters. I'm not sure why, but they do. So, this is a little description of Bias Bay, again from AD Blue's article. 65 miles northeast of Hong Kong was notorious as the pirate stronghold in the interwar years. Unfortunately, it was just outside Hong Kong territorial waters and came within the jurisdiction of the Cantonese authorities. Who were either unwilling or unable to cooperate with the Royal Navy against the pirates. Nationalist and anti-foreign feelings of the Cantonese probably contributed to this, as did the fact that the warlords of Kwangtung were suspected of being in league with the pirates. Whether this was so or not, it was definitely established that pirates based on Bias Bay committed 9 major piracies between 1924 and 1926. So basically, they keep building up. They keep building up. And that causes Britain a problem, because every time they do something, Britain does go and penalise them. They do a lot of work on this. But it's complicated. And things are also complicated in this period, especially as it goes on, by the fact that you have some issues for Britain in terms of command. Now, that is not on the left, this picture, Vice Admiral Sir Alan Frederick Everett. In fact, I don't have a picture of him. That is Rear Admiral David Murray Anderson, and he has a whole distinguished career all in and of himself. He goes on to be a colonial official and all sorts of things. He's a very, very clever gentleman. But the thing is, he's temporary commander. Everett is a good guy. Is considered a good commander, but he has some. It's either he's invalided home due to poor health, and really the poor health is a breakdown, and could be the pressures of the station. It could be the pressures of World War One, and he hadn't really got over them. It could be lots of reasons why, but he does have a breakdown. And the Royal Navy handles it very sensitively. They get him home, they get him looked after, they make it safe for him. But they also have to replace him quite quickly. And this is where you find out there are other officers on the command station. There is the Rear Admiral Yangtze River. And the Yangtze River station, Rear Admiral, is David Murray Anderson, who quickly takes over the role and continues it for a couple of months. And the other one who takes on over this is a gentleman called Sinclair Alexander. And I am going to expand this to read this out and describe, because, well, you know, it involves one of my favourite admirals. Not. Yes, it's according to the Earl of Cork and Orley. Yes, the gentleman from Norway. Yes, the one who manages to get everything wrong. Yes, the one who does the strange... does all sorts of strange things and tries to do all sorts of things to actual commanders who actually can fight a war. I was at one time supposed to have great resemblance to Admiral Alexander Sinclair, and presumably that was so, for many people have greeted me in the belief that I was he. I have often noticed a look of disappointment appear on their people's faces when they discover their mistake. I can hardly flatter myself that he was suffered in the same way. Well, Sinclair is considered one of the brightest and most able officers of his generation. Cork and Orley definitely wasn't. Cork and Orley. So I can imagine people's great disappointment when they meet him. It would be like, I don't know, thinking you were going to meet Stephen Hawking and finding out you met Simon Hawking. I'm not sure. Does Simon Hawking exist? I don't. You see S. Hawking, you think you've got Stephen Hawking. Turns out it's a very nice gentleman called Simon Hawking, who's very good. Who could actually probably, let's say, better in his field than Cork and Orley was. Cork and Orley, yeah. Orley is an interesting guy. I keep calling him Orley, don't I? No, Cork and Orley. It tells you everything you need to know about him as an officer, that he remembers being accused of looking like a more senior officer, and people being disappointed about him. Yeah. What can I say? They're good officers. They are hard-working officers, at least two of these ones. All three of them. All three of these officers are good, hard-working, but they don't really have the time on station to do what they want. Sinclair has to come home because he's got another appointment he needs to maintain. He's been sent out there as an emergency appointment to cover the role. And this is a real problem with time on station. If you go back to this one, you'll see that these officers, 1919 to 1922, 1922 to 4, they're roughly in post for roughly 2 years. These are in post for roughly a year, if not less. You need experience on station. The Royal Navy understands this, and they start working on it. Hello, Bijan. So, some key events from this period, 1924 to 1926. So, here is the report from Emerson while he is in charge. On the 31st of July, the Royal Marine Platoon from the light cruiser Durban was landed to protect the life and property at the premises of the International Export Company, Nanking, where there was some labour trouble. In the course of removing the mob, a detachment of Chinese police injured some coolies. With a xenophobic bias rather typical of the time, quite untruthfully, it was reported in elements of local press that the Royal Marines had killed the men. In August, Hermes arrived in the Far East in the command of Captain Cecil Talbot. So that's when it gets there. And December, Mr. Cecil Clementine, Governor of Hong Kong, wrote, the forces of Red Canto government are mainly under the control of General Chiang Kai-shek, who is said to be a professional soldier and not a politician. I can get no reliable information concerning him, and I do not know how far he is under Bolshevik influence. His troops certainly have been drilled and equipped by the Russians. In January 1926, this changes to the report. Number of Russian Bolsheviks presently in Canton is 144 men. No trace of active women agents. Each Chinese regiment has 2 Russian military instructors. The head of the Soviet is South China is named Borodin. And then on the 20th of March 1926 at 0300 hours in the morning, Chiang Kai-shek decided that he had too many Soviet influence and they were trying to take over everything. So he rounds up 25 communists. He has the Soviet advisors all confined to their residences, and basically he takes over the Kuomintang and manages to keep friends with Borodin, so he keeps his supplies happening at the same time. What is Britain dealing at this point? In May, there is the general strike. There's all sorts of things going on at home. Now, let's talk about this in proper. So, the July events. Why was Anderson so sure the Marines hadn't killed the men? Well, as I understand it from when I read the file, which was a while back, and I couldn't actually read this particular page today because it was nice and smudged by my camera. Hey-ho. The Marines had bullets, but hadn't loaded them in their guns. They were just using their guns like that. So their rifles were basically, they were using them to hold people back. And the coolies in question were shot. So, as no British Marine had fired a bullet, it was quite easy for them to say they hadn't been killed them. But, you know, some of the stories. Anyway, Hermes, certainly the British, I'm not saying the British were blameless in every incident, trust me, they weren't, but in this one it seems they were. If you do enough incidents, it's going to be one where you are. There's Hermes, having fun. In Hawaii at that picture, but that's roughly the time we're talking about. You also have to, so you have to consider that what's going on at this point. This point, there is not even the nationalist government of Chiang Kai-shek or various other things in charge of China. China is a hodgepodge of feudal lords of different groups, each claiming power and presence. You've got Soviet influence coming in, you've got all sorts of things. So you are dealing with, in many ways, not quite sure if you could call it a failed state, because you have certain regions which are heavily influenced by outside powers are pretty much running them. But it's not the China we know today, and it's not the China we imagine from its past. New IKB 4472. I'm slightly worried that you have now composed the prayer of the Blackburn. Kingsrook. Every time I hear the phrase general strike, I immediately think of the army staff taking an unauthorized break. That would be quite funny if they did. 9640. Kind of like how the Queen's Guard carries guns without them actually being loaded. Yes, the Guard's guns aren't loaded. And odd how navies care about piracy in strategic areas, e.g., the end of the Red Sea versus Southwest Africa. Yeah, they do, and they don't. They care about piracy pretty much everywhere. It can cause them trouble. If there's enough trade going for it, then they're going to get the money for it. It's the question. It's not just where does the Navy care about the piracy. Navies don't like piracy as a whole. They like to have a monopoly on the action of violence at sea. But the thing is, they also, it's where will the politicians give them the funding for? Captain C4, did the RN have problems post-World War II as well of a lack of experienced officers, or having to be replaced early due to stress breakdowns because everyone's worn out from the war? They had similar issues post-World War I. You had some good officers who were worn out because of the war. You had some good officers who managed to okay. You have Vian hang around for a while. You have Casper John. You have all sorts of good officers who carry on, but you do have officers who are worn out. And you have to balance it. You really do have to be very careful while you're balancing this. So, now we're into 1926 to 1931, and you're going to notice something immediately. I'm talking about 5 years, and there are 2 commanders, of which one of those spends an inordinate amount of time out there, Thrit. And there's also a guy called Weston. And I have some good stories to describe them. Really good stories to describe them. So, this is an account by, when he was retired and writing it, Paymaster Rear Admiral W. Martin in The Adventures of a Naval Paymaster, published 1924 on page 2912. He said, on a Sunday morning, his ships hoisted the church pennant, and the crews went to divine service. A Zeppelin came out to attack it. He did not disturb the Sunday worship, but Twirt sent up a small aeroplane, which mounted to a great height in a very short time. The Zeppelin was soon seen falling in flames. Then Twirt made a general signal to his ships, sing hymn number, which each ship did, and hundreds of British sailors sang, O happy band of pilgrims, look upward to the skies, where such a light affliction shall win you such a prize. The 8th verse of O Happy Band of Pilgrims. Contrast, Vice Admiral Wastell was known more for his diplomatic skill. And this example, when Dr. Sun Yat-sen's mausoleum is dedicated in 1929, I think, even though Dr. Sun had died in 1925, it took 4 years to build his mausoleum outside Nanking. The day ended with a dinner on board HMS Kent, the county-class cruiser, of course, which was flagship, Admiral Wastell's flagship, in which 50 sat down to dinner, including all the diplomatic body and every member of the Chinese government. It was a tremendous success. Basically, you have him, who is sent out there with no uncertain terms to basically explain to the Japanese how dangerous they are, and him, who is very good at diplomacy. You might have also noticed a habit here. It's actually very cheap to send out very intelligent officers, and there's a very good reason for doing that to the Far East. It's part of the deterrent strategy, because who are the officers which the most of the Japanese Navy is going to come in contact with? These ones. And if they are good, very intelligent, very able commanders, what is their Japanese Navy's impression of the Royal Navy going to be if these are the officers they see on a regular basis? They're going to assume that the Royal Navy is like that the Royal Navy is all like this. Perceptions matter, especially deterrence. Garmin, I often suspect the Queen's guards may be loaded, or at least some, even if they are hidden. Vision. Sam Pebble's novel written by USN Chief Officer who served on the China Station. That is a good one. New IQ 472, money 16 or 40. They might be taking a very liberal interpretation of the phrase not loaded. Ian Cut. Lots of drawings of officers rather than photos. Are these the same artist? I think so, as I understand it. I couldn't find decent pictures of these officers, but I could find these drawings, and I'm not sure where they came from. Adam, as someone from Scarborough, John Paul Jones was a pirate. Very conflicting idea of views watching the Bonhomme Richard burn. Vision. Harm's Way, written by USN press officer who served on Admiral Halsey. Yeah. Oh, speaking of those Halsey and all these things, there's actually someone suggested Sprunts for one of the for the Patron Live at the moment on the Patron vote. So if you haven't voted, please do go and vote in the Patron video and on the Patron selection, because there's good options that come up. Let me remind myself what they are. The options this month are, for February, the Royal Navy strategic role in 1980s NATO. Where would the Royal Navy take the lead in potential conflict with the Soviet Union? Both of those suggested by Joseph Sullivan. Strategic analysis of the 1971 Indo-Pakistani Naval War, suggested by Yogi Khan. The evolution of revenue cutters in opposition to smuggler cutters, often built on the same ziplies, suggested by Felix B. Raymond Sprunts, the man legend, a case study, as suggested by Ian Carr, and Fast Attack Craft, i.e. torpedo, U-boat, and gunboats in World War I Adriatic, by Carl von Gasberg. Yes, you have a chance, if you voted, of making Carl's dreams come true, and we're discussing the Adriatic. That will make him very happy. Carl Harmon, how much is Patreon? I think it's about £3 a month. It's the lowest. There are various settings. If you want some merchandise, there is higher settings, because I haven't yet. I've sort of, I've started off the merchandising options by having the things on the Patreon as part of that, the things that go out with that, and I'm sort of working out how much of demand and what you can get and what it looks like from that. Shomack, I still want to work on a series talking about just a reference library now, not talk about, but just working on a reference library right now, finding a good job. Cool. And I do too. And I know it got kind of swept out of the way by all the stuff we had going on over Christmas. I'm not sure about you, but I got swamped. But I am planning on getting more organized and better. I think some easier once I've got my office. No, that sounds strange, but I think the trouble is you don't sleep well when your office is also your bedroom, because you don't really get to switch off. You should monetize the Blackburn cult, make bank. No, I'm not. Greg Slotty, will the Blackburn be mentioned the Adriatic one? It's on World War One, so doubtful, but maybe the experience will filter into it. Right. So, I'm going to leave these on the big screen for a second while I quickly pop to facilities. I'll be back in a second. Bad editing. Spruance was an interesting man, with many, many randomness. Right, so what do they get up to? Well, you have all sorts of things going on. You have the events going on in 1926. Emperor Hirohito comes to the throne officially. Again, that's supposed to be Throne, and it's Torrown. Yeah. Basically, the lack of time to... the fact that I did all the research by handwritten books and then have tried to throw this together today and put it all together today is biting me a bit here. For apologies. And 1900, it's interesting to note that the British ships visiting the port of Shanghai accounted for 27% of the total number of ships, but 32% of the total tonnage. So whilst they were second in ship numbers to the Chinese, they actually matched the total of the tonnage of the Chinese and Japanese ships visiting combined. There was the Jinan incident. HMS Kent arrived in August, and in December there was the theoretical Chinese reunification. And in 1929 there's the Sino-Soviet War going on. Basically, there is lots and lots of fun. You also have the Naval Treaty, which has fun for carriers everywhere in terms of more restrictions, but you also, and this is the big thing, have all those options about sloops, and you start to have sloop production really starting to step up again in the 1930s. It's something which it should be, let's be honest. Basically, what the Britain should have done is the moment it developed sloops were allowed in treaties, it should have been building at least a flotilla of them a year, and probably getting Australia, Canada, South Africa, and India to, between them, match that a year. So that by you got to World War II, you had lots and lots of anti-submarine warfare sloops in service, and you'd built up their navies. But they weren't, but they were doing some construction, and the rules were there. So Articles 8, 9, and 10 have the relevancy. But, interesting enough, the treaty reconfirms the rules around bases. It says they still stay there. Ian Carr, HMS President, Kent, good President ship class. Yes, the counties were. So, again, it's no surprise you've had the Hawkins out here. They've been reinforced. So, Britain keeps reinforcing with their most impressive cruisers. So then the counties come out, and then eventually the towns start coming out. So, it's always, hello, we're here. We've got these lovely big ships. These are cruisers. And it's a very fine art between balancing with your capabilities. Ian Khan, could sloops be sold off as, say, trawlers or rented out as trawlers in peace after a few years of service? They could be turned into small merchant ships and pleasure craft, quite easily. Sloops were too big to be local trawlers, but they would make small merchant ships. If you think about it, if you're talking about a 2,000-ton sloop, that would fit in with most merchant ships. Or sold to other small navies, yes. There are lots of options for them. So, in 1927, Tritt gets annoyed with what's going on, and you'll be able to see why, because we'll start talking about these events and what they were getting involved in. Retaliatory action. And these are basically his establishing his rules of engagements. As Her Majesty HM Government have delegated to me certain discretionary powers, I wish to impress upon all commanding officers of His Majesty's ships the urgent necessity of achieving successfully the local retaliatory measures required to punish and prevent the recurrence of hostile action by the Chinese, with the smallest possible expenditure of ammunition and other resources. This is the man who will later on organize the massed aircraft and troop attacks. The expenditure of a large amount of ammunition with indifferent results is undesirable from both a political and economical point of view. since it tends to diminish the morale effect of such gunfire and may encourage the Chinese to go to greater lengths. While therefore His Majesty's ships have authority to return fire which has been directed at them, or at any other vessel flying the British flag using the main armament and manoeuvring the ships requisite, such action should only be taken when the target is definitely located and where the gunfire can be really effective. 4. In cases where the target cannot be located, or where for any other reason no effective retaliatory action can be taken at the time, I am to be informed immediately of circumstances giving sufficient detail to enable other units of His Majesty's Navy to proceed to that point, particularly to deal with the culprits as ordered by me. 5. Commanding officers are to note that the instructions contained in para 4 above apply equally to any circumstances in which the lives of British nationals are endangered or their property is suffering actual, deliberate, and wanton destruction. In cases where the lives of British nationals are in imminent peril, and there is no time to refer to me, commanding officers may open fire to save life. In every case, I am to be immediately and fully informed of the details. A report should contain, as far as possible, the exact position of the culprits and the scene of the outrage, and suggested local punitive action, with forces required for its successful and speed execution as ordered by me. I'm presuming speedy execution. Again, sorry, typing. So, why is this memorandum stored in the Foreign Office, not the Admiralty? Well, I couldn't find a copy in the Admiralty. It hadn't seemed to be stored by the Admiralty, but the Foreign Office had received a copy and they'd stored it. And honestly, when I was looking for it, I was looking online to confirm this one, which had it in it from the FO as well. And you always would tell, in fact, TRIT would often, TRIT and other animals would always work hand in hand with the Foreign Office. You can never consider these things one-sided, i.e., oh, it's the Navy doing this, or it's the Foreign Office doing this. No, they were very good at joined-up work, so the Navy would work with the Foreign Office hand in glove. And Hunan always thought that not industrializing India was the Empire's biggest mistake. Bright, capable people, and imagine seriously shipbuilding repair yards in India, Med and Far East, there were. This is going to sound strange, but there were serious shipyard facilities. The problem with maintaining and fixing ships in India wasn't the shipyard facilities, it was the supply of armor and armor grade steel. And setting up those facilities in India were in the plans for the 1930s, but hadn't been done by the time war happened. So actually there are some very, very big facilities for maintaining ships, and ships would be sent into India throughout World War II. They'd also be sent down to South Africa throughout World War II. So we talk about ships, and I did a video on this where we talk about ships that go to America. Well, they also went to other places to be fixed, in terms of India, South Africa, all over the place. Melanie Sigavonis suggested local punitive action, Such a nice way of seeing retaliation. Well, the whole point is you have to consider that the British aren't just dealing with piracy, and sometimes operations which are classified as counter-piracy are not counter-piracy. They are counter whatever problem there is on land. Sometimes operations which are actually counter-piracy are classed as something else, because counter-piracy wouldn't work as a thing you could openly admit in that scenario. Well, as we've already been over with Twit, he does have a particular sense of humour. He is a very good commander, and he's been sent up to fix problems. And fix them hard. Alan Phillington, did the Navy have the equivalent of the Army political officer? No. And the British Army hasn't ever had a political officer. That's I think the modern PLA do. Shillington, shipyards aside, more generally, India was deliberately deindustrialized as part of the colonial economic system, where manufactured goods were sold back to the colonies. Yeah, that's the real problem. It's not the shipyards. The shipyard facilities are maintained and upgraded in India. Although actually prior to the British involvement in India, there hasn't been as much of a shipbuilding emphasis as we would possibly expect, given Western background, because India had been so busy dealing with its stuff internally, they hadn't expanded externally. And when you've got the huge land borders you have, then the Navy had never really been factored into their military operations. In fact, that's something the Westerners bring to India in some respects. The large navy. Others, there had been what we would call local maritime powers, very, very local maritime powers, but no really big sort of naval build-up in India. And then one can help out one Chinese power by stomping on a rival warlord as anti-piracy ops. Bingo. And sometimes you need to do it, because sometimes that warlord is really annoying. And sometimes you're stomping on people who may or may not actually be not Chinese at all. They may or may not be Soviet or Japanese. They just happen to be pirates, and we're attacking pirates, and yes, it was a covert operation. Who knows? Yeah, there's a reason the Royal Navy doesn't have political officers. Honestly, it just wouldn't work. Be a never-ending of people. Oh, what happened to your political officer? Oh, well, he jumped over the side. So, what did Twit use this for? Well, we have the Yat-Shing incident, and this is the famous one which we've already been talking about today. So, on the 30th of August, 1927, the Yat-Shing, owned by the Jardines, quite a major merchant company, was seized near Sotal, taken to Bias Bay, thoroughly looted, and then released. She reached Hong Kong on the 31st of August, at which point they received some direction. The governor Clementi said, in view of the piracy of the British SS Yat-Shing by the Bias Bay gang, news of which outreach has reached me this evening. I have the honour to request that a naval punitive expedition, according to the plan already arranged, may be undertaken forthwith against the pirate lairs in Bias Bay. Now, this is the interesting thing. She gets back in on the 31st of August. He sends that note on the same day. And on the very next day at 04:15 hours, which shows how close A, Bias Bay is to Hong Kong, and B, how much force was already in Hong Kong. A landing force of 450 men, 26 officers, and 18 Hong Kong policemen arrive. Supported by Hermes, Argus, a couple of cruisers, and some destroyers. And, yeah. They level the place. 40 houses, 40 standard houses, 10 large houses, multiple warehouses, junks, various boats and ships, harbour facilities are flattened, burnt to the ground. There is no resistance. The pirates seem to know they're coming, and so they've got out of there. But the whole place is basically razed in true British style. So they don't meet any resistance, but they demonstrate the full strength of the British firepower. And it really is the full strength of the British firepower. Interestingly enough, as they're making this presentation, and it happens so closely, there happens to be some Japanese observers in the area, there happens to be some American observers in the area, and they see the sheer weight of firepower the British are prepared to bring. You also have the scenario where you have, not using radios, but apparently using flares. They're calling in fire support So they are chucking flare grenades, or smoke grenades, which are coloured smoke, forward at a target, and then the whichever ferry aircraft, it's a free F or a flycatcher, I think it's mostly free Fs, comes in and goes boom, bye bye. It works. It's the full firepower range, and it's deterrence basically. So we know that they commit about 11 major incidents by the end of 1927. They've done 9 between 1924 and 1926. But the thing is, if you consider that they do 11 incidents in roughly 4 years, and so that's 48 months, which means you have an average of almost 4.5 months without one incident every 4.5 months. Good luck. It makes things safe. Grace Elsie, I think it slipped on some tea, perhaps. Hammer accidentally got tangled in some rope in a tragic laundry accident. There's so many options for getting rid of a political officer. Bijan, good book on pirate actions on the China Station. Not really one. It's something I think I'm going to have to write at some point, but I think it's going to be involved in my sloop book. Because there are lots of... because I was talking about the sloop incidents, and pretty much 9 times out of 10, the incidents are dealt with by sloops. And in this case, the political officer was a semi-military posting invented by Hastings of the East India Company to cover the military police grey area, political grey area. There are so many of those. Curious WRT aircraft carriers? As an old friend called Jasper Coates ran the Persian Gulf littoral during this period and was RAF. There's a fairly large number of them. It's one of those interesting incidents where the Royal Navy really does go to town. And how do I put this? One of the stats that was produced was that the men boarding from the ships were at the beach within 10 minutes of getting off the ships. They had destroyers in close pelting things with their guns. They had the cruisers standing off, and then they had aircraft carriers launching aircraft. And it's just non-stop. It's a non-stop thing. They are really pushing it hard. And it works. Shoot me, the RN go to town? There was no town left. Well, that's how the RN goes to the town. They take the town. Bijan, were the Hong Kong police there to make official arrests? Theoretically. If anyone needed to be arrested, they were there for that. In car, naval flyers were RAF at this time. The RNS Fleet Air Arm did not exist. Well, that's... Okay, so... Okay. How do I explain this? So, the RNS Fleet Air Arm ceases to exist in 1918. But most of the senior officers who serve in the fleet air arm that exists in the interwar period before it going back to the sort of the Navy, and it's called the fleet air arm, by the way, are ex-RNAS or new entry. They spend quite a lot of time with the Navy. And whilst technically they are RAF, there also is a section of them who are naval officers. So by 1927, there has been an agreement. There are a few naval officers amongst their rank who have a flying rank with the RAF and a naval rank. It caused a lot of fun. Richard Order, hello, Dr. Clark. Hello, everyone. What would you call yourself if you're a pirate? Blonde beard. No. Tempting question. I'll think about that one. Hello, Osprey28. How are you doing? Hello, Juno111. So, it's a sort of incident which causes a lot of blowing up. And then we have the next one. And the next incident is the SS Irene incident, also in 1927. So, on this occasion, the SS Irene is seized off Hong Kong by some pirates on the 19th of October. And on the 20th of October, they have a not nice experience. HMS ML4, sister of HMS ML5, which was also coming along there, surfaces not very far away. And this tells you how good the Irene is. She can't outrun the L4 on the surface. And the L4 basically goes, we're keeping up with you. Stand to and stop. No. Stand to and stop. No. By a gun. Takes out the engine room. Causes the Irene to start to sink. So, unfortunately, 14 lives were lost. But L4 and L5 save over 230 lives, and including some of the pirates, 10 of whom who are captured end up being hung for piracy anyway. But they're all rescued as a few other naval ships turn up, and they try and get the Irene to shore. Doesn't really work. But this was counter-piracy by submarine. And as far as I know, no other navy has ever used a submarine for counter-piracy operations. I don't think the Royal Navy was planning on using a submarine for counter-piracy operations. They just got the signal that this ship had been nicked, and they were going to... Ooh, what do you see through the periscope? Oh, I see the ship being nicked. Oh, Jimmy, shall we go? Yes, let's go. Hello! Well, the Royal Navy. Yes. There was actually a lawsuit brought a few years later for the damage that they caused, and it was found in favour of the Royal Navy. Now, let's see. Yep. It's an interesting time. So, that's back to the beginning. As I said, the 1930s. I have up until 1931 done. I just don't have 1932 to 1940 done. So that's going to be part of the long patrol to be recorded for Tuesday. But any questions? Because we'll turn this session into questions time. The rest for about. Well, we'll see when the questions run up. Kingsrook, does the US end deploying SEALs via sub to do counter-piracy counter? Not really, because that's Special Forces doing it, and they do counter-piracy all the time. I don't think... This was a regular submarine. This was no Special Forces, nothing. This was just it with its gun going, you're stopping. Dunner camera. Oh, hi there. Do you really want to do this? Oh, you do. Righto, far. Yeah, pretty much that's what happened. You know, come on. L4 hadn't fired a gun in, what, 9 years by this point. John Shea, why a lawsuit against the RN? Why and how? Apparently, she used excessive force in trying to stop them. The astute class definitely need a 4.5-inch gun just in case. I don't. Well, that could be interesting. Adam Flinton. Curiously, Jasper commanded the Omani Navy and the Trunkle Oman Scouts at the same time, so RAF people had to walk and get feet wet at this point. If correctly, Jasper was ex-Royal Navy Air Service, but I'm not sure. Vision. In World War II in Pacific, USN subs did deal with small blockade runners on surface. Why they added more guns, including 5-inch surplus AA guns? Well, you might as well. Old Richard, what was the relationship of the Bias Bay companies to the human tag? Well, it's when Chiang Kai-shek has firmer control, he wants arms supplies from Europe, and to give himself a better opinion and look like a more secure, stable power, he does try and deal them. Kingsrook, with regards to my Port Mosby port class sloop design, you and the Biltram's crew can cover it on your own if you wish. Tempting, but no, we'd have you on there. So, don't give them ideas. You've already given a crate a few monsters here. It could be fun. John Shea, RN, what is excessive force? Look, we just saw that, there are some very strict rules of engagement Trit is breaking down. Basically, it's shoot, but make sure you know what you're shooting at. Unless there's life in danger, in which case, shoot first and then ask questions later. And if you're no life in danger and you can't shoot because you're not sure what you're shooting at, tell me where it is and I'll send someone else to come shoot at it later. So those are very strict rules of engagement. That for Twit is practically, an order to not fire. Or as close as he's ever going to get to one. Shomak, the 5-inch 25 was actually more precise on a sub than the 3-inch 50 or 4-inch 50 the USN used before it. That doesn't surprise me. I know, however, when walking, he was famous for parachute deliveries of specific scotch in the middle of nowhere. Well, that's just a useful skill to have. How was he on delivering Iron Brew? Vision, did you see my Ballad of Victorious on Discord, based on the Wellerman Comes? Yes, and I have shared it with Jamie and Drac, and if we get who we want for next week's recording, we will probably see if we can't do a recording of it. Dunra Kamino. Fun fact, protection of Norwegian oil platforms falls to the Army Special Forces, not the Navy Special Forces. And the Navy Special Forces was sent to Afghanistan instead. Norway is occasionally strange. But there again, it's the Navy which goes a Viking, doesn't it? So perhaps it's sensible to send them to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be a good guest due to my health issues, so unless you send me a list of questions to answer in text form, you're covering yourselves. We might do that for you then. And we'll pick who gets to read them out. Chris says, I'm somewhat afraid to ask whether the 14 dead were pirates or the poor stokers who were seemed to get the bad end deal. Different times, I guess. It was a mixture of the two, from what I understand. The RM was very careful to... I think they tried to track down the stokers and pay them compensation, their families. Bishop, soon may the RAF ship come to bring us coffee, tea, and rum. Probably. It's very polite, these rules of engagement. But as you see, the thing was, it was stacked in the RN's favour, especially thanks to the Treaty of Sitsen. British ships of war coming for no hostile purpose. By the way, they sort of basically say, so if you're coming for a hostile purpose, you can't admit it and can't come into shore. Why would we tell you in advance we're coming for a hostile purpose? Turning 3434. When's the next build trumps? I haven't heard anything past 32. They're all live on Simplecast. There's been something, I'm not sure what's happening. I sent some through to SimSec and they didn't get published, so I'm sort of waiting for them to get published on Twitter before I send them any more. But they are all up on Simplecast. They come out weekly on Simplecast. Carmen, can I have a special on designs by listeners? Probably going to get one of those. Vision, I have absolutely no musical expertise or talent, but I think it might be somewhat singable. We will try. Anderson, curious what the Grey Zone Warfare X Red Sea today. Problem with LCS was very expensive and sloop, but good anti-piracy platform. I don't consider the LCS a good anti-piracy platform. This is the thing. The LCS sacrifices everything to try and get 40 knot speed. And they really do sacrifice everything. And you sit there and go, why? In the nicest way, in a world where you've got several hundred knot missiles, what's 40 knot speed going to really get you? Well, that 35 knot speed wouldn't get you, which would cost a lot less. Not a wolf. Rules of engagement are great for those in the thick of it, at least when they are sensible. Well, as I said, I think those were quite sensible rules of engagement. Shumack, it's like needing to declare all the income you made from stealing. Good lord, that's terrible. Carmen, also Google Podcasts have it on it. Oh, cool. I didn't realise. Bertrand, could build trumps go up on YouTube? We might do that at some point. We might do some build trumps on YouTube. We are planning on doing some more specials on YouTube. Not a wolf. Cyclones were pretty effective while loaned to the US Coast Guard. Maybe something like that? Potentially. Ideally, you need something river classy with slightly lengthened. That sort of for a modern counter piracy OPV operation sloop, you need river class, slightly lengthened, with a UAV hangar in it and a double 40 or 57mm up front, and another one up back, and maybe some some double 30s either side, and that's about it. Steph Thompson, I'm slightly worried that you fell asleep listening to 34. I think you need to sleep first, then listen to 34. It's a good one, and I'm glad you're enjoying it, but don't worry, get to sleep. You need to sleep. You're working freaking very, very hard, Stafford. John, another question. Were other navies involved in anti-piracy around China shores? France in Hapong Bay? US with its ships? There were other navies getting involved in counter-piracy, definitely. As I said, the counter-piracy is a good reason. Saying you're involved in counter-piracy, honestly, you would... It's going to sound strange, but if there wasn't for piracy, you'd almost have no reason to have your ships there. If everyone's a stable nation state, and you have your ships operating forward, or an apparently stable nation state that you're theoretically not actually in a war with, or not in a Cold War with, then you have no reason to have your ships operating forward. The only reason you can have for operating ships forward in that scenario is piracy. So, actually, for Britain, you could argue that stamping out piracy altogether in China would have caused them more problems than help, because it removed a large thing of the justification of keeping the China squadron as strong as it was. Yes, you can still justify having a strong force presence in the Indian Ocean because of India, and the same with Australia and New Zealand, and to an extent Singapore. But you can't really justify having a strong force presence based at, I don't know, Hong Kong, Wei Hai Wei, all these places, if you don't have a reason for it. And you can't come out and say publicly, we're here because we're worried about Japan. That wouldn't look good. Or we're here because we're worried about America. Again, that wouldn't look good. So China, at this time being a semi-failed state, and piracy were very good reasons to justify the British keeping a large force, relatively speaking, in the Far East. And it was the same for Japan, and the same for America. And France and other nations got involved as they felt like it, really. They didn't need as much to be involved. They weren't as exposed. Were seaplane tenders involved, or did it win on style at this point? No, HMS Pegasus turned up and was used. Mummy 1640, 40 knot speed will announce your presence to everything within a passive sonar in a 300 kilometer radius versus instead of just the 190 kilometer radius as with the 35 knot speed. Yep. Vision, there was a pirate attack off Nigeria the other day. A Danish warship responded. I feel sorry for the pirates now. Thunder Common, there's still NATO anti-pirate squadron around? There is a NATO task force and a EU task force, I think, wandering around. So Thompson, chat for the was great. They got Jamie quite Dr. Clark and chat. But it was great. They got Jamie quite wound up, but I was just beat for the last few days. Yeah, we just keep prodding Jamie about the Collins class submarine replacement saga. It's just fun to see what comes out. Plus, he's very informed on it. But the trouble is, Jamie spent so long, sometimes being the journalist on the side of asking questions, he's more comfortable asking questions than necessarily talking, and we try and encourage him to talk because he really does know his stuff. He's really very, very good. In fact, he's amazing. Yeah, the trouble is for the Americans, they don't have spearfish. If they had spearfish, then having the 40-knot ships would make sort of more sense. And also keeping China as a semi-failed state means the dragon stays asleep. Yes and no. That wasn't really so much of a worry to them. You have to remember that this time the European powers have a huge amount of hubris. Yes, there is a large number of people who do not believe in this whole idea of racial superiority and all those things. But there is a significant enough minority who bang on about it and who manage to inhabit various halls of government that European and Western powers actually do have issues with permeating their thinking. Cinematico, the Japanese had a good reason to keep forces in the Far East. It's their home. Yes! But that for the Royal Navy is a problem. Inca, why were the quarterdecks cut down and refits instead of Canny-class cruisers when cabin space was at a premium? Because it made it easier to launch and recover boats and enable them to do other things as well, which were kind of useful. Reduced weight at the stern, which helped them speed up a bit as well. Kurosowski, I think the pirates would be most afraid of a Russian warship being the one which responded these days. Well, the Russians do have a habit of firing missiles the size of buses at them. Carmen, what's our commitment to anti-piracy at the moment in Yemen and Sudan Act? There are frigates wandering around. And I think there might be a river class wandering around somewhere. Rosmaros, going to head out now. Thanks for talk and conversation. Thank you. Take care. Hmm. Outrun a VA111 and get back to me. Answer, with regards to being on bilge pumps, there is very little guarantee that I'd be awake for recording, given my inability to maintain a proper sleep schedule. That sounds cruel, an unusual punishment for you. I wish there was more I could do for you, mate. Subtle Regenic Select Breeding. Grew up around horses and dog people. It goes way past government and hobbies. There's all sorts of weird stuff going on. Russians should paint the missiles to look like buses. That would be good. That would be quite cool. But no, they are colossal things, the Russian missiles. Basically, the Russian idea was we might only get one hit on a carrier. Let's make sure it counts. Some interesting officers chosen and sent, and some very interesting times had by all. You would argue, definitely, this officer is the warfighting one, and that one is the presence one, but they're both very intelligent officers. Oh, Richard, was Singapore an actual crown colony in possession or just a friendly host? Has a governor, so it's technically a colony. It's very much Singapore is an interesting scenario, as is Malaya, and frankly, I think a lot of the problems come from there, from the fact that the governors are very focused on getting as much finance in the area as they can and not thinking about defense. They seem to presume no one would dare attack them in the Far East. Take care, Shanef. Enjoy. Right. Inca, why was A turret four times and B turret two? The KG is unlike other battleships, where the larger turret was where the ship was broader. Honestly, because the B turret is raised up, so if you have it if you have it as a quadruple, and the other one as a double, it would be all sorts of weight issues. So no, they kept them as some. Honestly, it would have made some more sense to have 3 trebles, 15 or 16 guns, rather than a quadruple, a double, and a quadruple. We had a working treble turret. We should have gone with a working treble turret and just stuck with it. Vision. Wired Magazine had a full issue special this month on a future war China, published excerpts from the novel by former USN Admiral and USN officer. USMC officer. That does sound worrying. But you have to remember, there is the scenario we have playing out on the Chinese-Indian border at the moment, which involves people hitting each other with sticks and stones. As 2 nuclear powers, to try and avoid escalation, have basically disarmed their soldiers, so they're using sticks and stones to fight each other off. Good luck, Gino 111. Peter Dawson, weight and stability. Exactly for the guns. Exactly. Stuff Johnson, how many modern black swans would it take to make the red dragons think twice? A lot. The whole concept of Black Swan was supposed to rebuild the Navy. In numbers. To be honest, that's what the Royal Navy's now trying to do with the Type 31s and the Type 32s, presumably. Presumably. If they come along. Chris Elsie, Churchill, I think, wanted 916s on the KGB. Everyone but the government and Chatfield didn't want the 14-inch on the KGBs. Right then, I'm going to say... Let's see, how long has this been? Because questions do appear to be dying down a bit. I'm going to say... What's the time? Yeah. Do about another 8 minutes. Mainly 8-10 minutes. Possibly a bit longer. Possibly 20 minutes. Not sure. But I want to go get some food at some point. And it's 20 to 9 here. And I've also got to go move some wood under cover because apparently the builders have left the spare wood from the offices out of uncovered, and it's going to rain on it. Carmen, could the Type 32s be anti-piracy impreza ships? Well, that's pretty much what the Type 31s are, so yes, they could well be. Sure, Mike. How much did Vickers pay Chatfield to be very dumb? Not as much as you'd hope. You have to remember Chatfield was Beatty's flag captain at Dogger Bank. And that explains so much. So how long till you sneak into the naming office and get a few in for the up-and-comers? Ooh, so tempting. Manly 1640, I'm not sure what feud means. Well, feud. Presuming that's something to do with China and India. King's Rook? That's we might do. Well do then. Must be off. Take care, old Richard. Dr. Clark. Thank you, old Richard. Take care. Gary Salsey, BT again. Oh, yeah. It's BT again. Right then, I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to have to go because I've just heard the power has gone in the back of the house. We have 2 circuits. The front is on one, the back is the other. Apparently the power's gone. So I'm going to quickly go and deal with that. I'm very sorry I'm going to go like this. I'm going to say thank you everyone for being here. Feud is pronounced as food. Oh, cool. And thank you very much. I do apologize for doing this. So... this is Dragon showing me BT. That's always going to the case. Richard, given what the Syrians have done with land equipment, homemade tanks, and and cannon, what do you think they do with a boat in the Civil War going on? So much. Right. Thank you very much. I'm very apologetic. I've got to go, but as I said, there's currently shouts because the lights, the things are kind of. I'm coming. Thank you. Take care. Sorry, I'm the only one who can get there.